Hey guys, how are you today? Today I have a very fascinating personality for you in our inspired personalities section. He is a very good friend of Chaitanya. You would have seen Chaitanya in previous episodes. His name is Chenthil Mohan. He also hails from South Tamil Nadu, and he is a MBA guy, sales and marketing professional turned into a fashion based photographer. And today, photography is his bread and butter. One of the major thing which is very fascinating is he is one of the maybe the only photographer who is actually having the international journal card. Okay, so or maybe he was, and today based on his inspiration, few of them would have joined. Okay, let's understand his journey, and we will also understand how this photography actually turned his career into a much needed, a well satisfied life. Okay, let's go for the discussion. Hi, Sendil, how are you?
Doing good, Satish. Quick correction. I hold an international press card for just cycling, and that's the only. There are a lot of sports photographers in India, but maybe I'm the only one who's shooting cycling across the country and outside the country as well. Doing great, and again, photography is a way of life for me with a fair bit of trials and tribulations, like any other entrepreneur. Uh, I'm not really sure whether I'm completely passion, yes, happy, yes, but the road is still bumpy in its own ways.
We'll definitely find out the road, because to understand the road, we have to start from the beginning, right? So,
Sure.
just give us your journey, Sendil, like from your MBA days to where you are.
Okay, so okay, I'll try to cut my entire 40 years in like under 5 minutes. So the thing is, my parents are doctors. My mom is a gynecologist and my dad is an anesthetist, and they come from this town in south called Kovilpatti. For a lot of people, Kovilpatti is in the news for the wrong reasons right now. But yeah, so that's the background. I was born in Tirunelveli, and my parents are doctors, but and they were quite ambitious doctors at that. Since they were ambitious, we moved a lot in my childhood, and I have 8 schools and 3 colleges. I mean, I studied through, and the one subject that I flunked all my life was second language. I failed Tamil, I failed Hindi, and I think I somehow pulled paper from some nearby guy and passed barely scraped through French. Uh, so academically, language was my biggest weak point, and I had no ambitions because when you come from South, that part of the world, all you think about is as soon as you finish, you need to do either engineering or medicine. And now that your parents are doctors, you have to be doctors. So that bit kind of I didn't have. I was just a happy-go-lucky guy who did what I wanted to do at that point. I was big into electronics when I was in school. I used to dick around a lot of electronics when I was younger, and I used to start building. I started building computers when I was like around 11th, 12th standard from the Intel Pentium days and stuff. So I always thought that I'll be a computer guy. And then I studied BSc electronics in Kovilpatti, where I did everything except study. I mean, from strikes to not going to college to sports to everything, I kind of dabbled in pretty much everything non-academic. And I also realized that sitting in front of a computer is not exactly my forte. I mean, I'm somebody who talks and I'm somebody who visualizes better. So since I kind of started realizing that I'm somebody who likes talking. At that point, my dad tried convincing me, saying, "I'll somehow get you a medical seat." I had to refuse that, and then later the IT boom started. This is like late 1999, 2000. IT was at its peak at one point, one of the peaks, and at that point, my dad thought, "Okay, he's settled. He'll do an MCA, and then he'll do a computer job, and sorted. Son is sorted." And then I threw a googly and I did an MBA at Madurai Kamaraj University. Like Chait, like Chaitanya, I did the same. I mean, I went to Madurai Kamaraj University because it was away from Kovilpatti, but not. But it's still my Madurai is still my comfort zone because I did a lot of my schooling in Madurai and stuff. So I went to Madurai. The 2 years that I did in Madurai was one of my most formative years of sorts because I grew up in hostels all my life, but learning by yourself, because when you study in a government university, most of the learning happens by yourself, and most of the learning is non-academic. You kind of learn survival skills. So that's something that I learned a lot about how to interacting with people, traveling, figuring out life. Um, and I was still the same by the time I was 21. I think I was 22 when I finished MBA, and I decided that the next course of action is go to Chennai, find a job. And again, I didn't know what job, because when you finish MBA, you have these high ideas that you need to work for a consulting company. Accenture, Anderson Consulting, and all that stuff. That's all I knew. And at that point, I had a what do you call a campus interview thing where Author Anderson had in one of the management meets, the Author Anderson consulting guy said, okay, the winner gets a campus placement or some shit, and I so happened to win that thing. How I won it is very shady, but I did win it. But the sad part is, by the time I finished MBA, Arthur Anderson didn't exist as a company. The whole Enron scandal happened, and that's it. The whole thing went for a toss. So by the time I finished my pilgrimage to Pondicherry and then came to Chennai, my campus placement didn't exist. So I had to find a job. At that point, that's when the real learning started. I learned how to hustle my way through. I did pretty much everything. I worked for the movie actor Sharat Kumar for a short period. I was handling his business interests, and then from there I kind of went one step at a time. Worked for some of his colleagues who are professional doctors and stuff. And I was really good at setting up companies, as in the basic paperwork that is involved in setting up a shell company. Sounds very shady, but I'm amazingly good at the memorandum of understanding and the whole partnership, private limited, the whole 9 yards. I can set it up from bank accounts, and that's when the paperwork. The loopholes to figure your paperwork out. Did my way through it, and then I landed up in Bangalore by about 2004 with this dream that Oracle had hired me as one of their IT sales guys. I really thought I arrived because that was the biggest name in my resume at that point, saying Oracle. Okay, done. I thought settled. Now we can have a good time. And I landed up in Bangalore. That's when life completely changed, because when I landed up in Bangalore, it so happened one weird incident happened where my bike was Tamil Nadu registration, which was in Bangalore, in Chennai. And then when I moved to Bangalore, I was staying with this friend who had a bike in Bangalore, which was K registration. And Karnataka at that point was pretty brutal when you have non-state vehicles. So we took a deal saying, you take my bike. He was moving back to Chennai. So I said, you take my bike in Chennai. I'll take your bike in Bangalore. And that's my introduction to Royal Enfield motorcycle, because he had a Royal Enfield bike and I was this puny guy who rode a Royal Enfield bike. And motorcycling started then. And I started clocking close to 30,000 kilometers every year for about 2 years consecutively, length and breadth of the country, seeing the world. Seeing the country. There's very few part of the country that I've not gone on a motorcycle. And that is when photography started kicking back again. As a child, my dad had introduced me to the basics of photography, physics of photography, and all of that, slide and film and all of that. But photography, as a growing up child, was never an affordable. When you're in Madurai, maybe you can expose a film, but you cannot wash a film, and print a film, not happening at all. But my entire childhood was film. So here I moved to Bangalore, working in Oracle, and suddenly digital photography was getting cheaper also by that time. And I was traveling the country, and I had a digital camera, and I was taking pictures. No Facebook, no Instagram, no distractions. You were just shooting because you want to shoot. And people started noticing, saying, "Hey, your pictures look good. Maybe you should do this. Maybe you should shoot for me." And at that point, a friend called me and said, "Would you mind coming and shooting for a corporate?" With I had absolutely no idea what it means to be a professional photographer, how to carry myself, how to deliver, nothing. I just know how to take pictures, which is just not even 25% of being a photographer. So I said okay, and then and he paid me 30,000 rupees back in 2008.
Wow.
And then I realized he had made another 30,000 rupees over and above what he paid me. Then I was like, okay, my business knowledge immediately kicked in and said, okay, this looks feasible. And the motorcycling also gives you that liberty. I mean, gives you that world view that the cubicle is not the be all and end all of the world. There is a world out there, and what you see in a corporate company is nothing related to real world. And you cannot be restrained in a cubicle at that point. And I said, okay, maybe I should become a photographer. And accidentally, I used to hate weddings as a child. And a friend dragged me, one of my Oracle colleagues dragged me saying, you have to shoot a wedding. And I landed up at a wedding and I shot, and I saw another photographer shoot also. And I was like, wow, he has two cameras. And all my equipment was borrowed equipment at that point. And I shot a bunch of pictures. It so happened that year was one of the first wedding photographer of the year competition in India. And my picture was shortlisted for it, not even nominated, shortlisted. And the other photographer's picture also was shortlisted, or it was nominated. And I was like, okay, if he is nominated and I am shortlisted, maybe I'm not too far away from it, and maybe I should do this a little more serious. And and I decided, okay, by 2009, I said, okay, has to be the way forward. Photography is the way forward. I should do something about it. True to being an MBA, I did a business plan, wrote everything, and figured how to do it. Then I told myself I'll do kids photography and wedding photography. The logic was down market or up market in India, people will always get married and people will always have children. And then I said, okay, let's do this. And by 2010, I quit my job. It all happened very fast. I quit my job, got married in a span of 10 days, and I became a photographer. And that's pretty much how I became a photographer. From then on, it's been a roller coaster ride of figuring out stuff.
Then how did this specific interest towards cycling came?
Cycling happened because when in the motorcycling community, we had a bunch of friends who were active cyclists. And one thing that I always something I've consistently been doing across my life is need for efficiency. And as a photographer, you start realizing that you need to be physically active and physically quite strong enough to survive a shoot. And then I started getting into cycling. I bought a cycle and I used to cycle for a bit. And then slowly I started realizing there is a whole cycling subculture in Bangalore. Bangalore is one of the hottest cycling subcultures Bangalore, I would say Bangalore is like the capital of Indian cycling of sorts. So that community just sucked me in, and initially I started doing a lot of what I would say is pro bono work of being a part of the community. I was more a part of the community and a photographer who did that because I did it for the love of it. In a true sense, an amateur is for the love of, and that's what I ended up doing. And cycling photography seriously started much later. But I was shooting cycling from 2011. I started photography as a full-time job in 2010. By 2011, I realized that there is a lot of cycling activity happening in Bangalore. And that's when the whole community was getting built up, as in people were coming together, they were organizing rides. And there is this one big event that happens every year. It used to happen till this year. It's called the Tour of Nilgiris. It's a cycling event where it starts in Bangalore, goes across 4 states. Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, 3 states. It goes across 3 states, cutting across all parts of Nilgiris. And it has about 1,000 kilometers over 8 days with about 14,000 meters of climbing and all that. So I just volunteered saying, I'll also come and take pictures for it. I saw one friend of mine take pictures for it and I said, hey, this looks like an interesting thing. And at that point, you just want when you're starting out, you're desperate for opportunities to flex your muscles, do stuff so that you know more about yourself. And I genuinely believe in uh, the 10,000 hour, Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour thing. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So, and I found opportunities. Anybody who asked me to do anything, I would just go and do it. So, and I found opportunity to volunteer myself, and I started doing TFN in 2011. Tour of Nilgiri in 2011, I started doing it. And then from then till now, I have shot that particular event 4 times, and I've ridden it personally once. And then once you embed yourself in a community that much, it becomes second nature. And cycling, that's how it started coming into play. Cycling is still a part of, I would call cycling as, I wouldn't even call it a profession. These are the communities that I'm a part of. Cycling, motorcycling, and my business crowd that I worked with. These are the communities that give me work as a photographer even now. So that's how cycling photography started for me.
Fantastic. See, two things which I can actually very clearly see out of your answers are, one is that when in 2010, when you decided to take it full time, it is occurring to me that like it was a very planned decision and well thought out decision, or probably in a way that you knew, okay, these are my pros, these are my cons, and I may survive well 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I may not survive well 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. This kind of is my reading correct? Number one.
Yes and no. Because before I got into it, I did everything a business guy would do. I did a SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, threat, all that shit I did. But all my plans went into the dustbin as soon as I started working. Because my reading of like all business guys, you read the problem very differently from what it actually is. So I had to keep constantly improvising. Yes, it was well planned out, but none of the plans actually mattered. Because I was a bumbling idiot through my way, through my entire journey, even now. So long story short, I planned a lot. I still plan a lot. But in most cases, 9 out of 10 times, my plans were always wrong.
Okay. In a way, I was actually wishing that you will answer it that way, because this is I consult a lot of startups. Okay, and 9 out of 10, or probably 9.9 out of 10, this is the fear that generally make people to stick on with their job rather than come out and try something on their own.
True.
Okay.
True.
And this is basically almost like a fishing question where I wanted this answer out of you. Okay.
Yeah.
Here now you have come. Okay, it's been 10 plus years now. Okay, so you have successfully sailed the sea. Okay, if you go back to 2010 again, okay, put your current learning into that. The reason why I'm asking you this question is that currently students community is there, passionate photographer, a passion is there. See, photography is almost like cricket. If I understand, like almost everybody wants to be a photographer. It can be mobile or any. But there is a small hesitation because the professional photography world is absolutely different from passion photography. Okay. What would be your advice, or probably, like learning chant to these people, saying that if you are ready for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, take the jump.
Okay. It's a bit of blind faith as well. Whatever passion projects you do, there is a degree of conviction that if you can, that's a degree of conviction I had it in myself. I didn't really care too much about whether it would be successful or not. Success
And
was
the conviction came from what?
The conviction came, it just kept me in a happy place. Photography is the one thing that on a bad day I can wake up and still take pictures and I can still be happy about it. My dad used to tell this about musicians. Musicians live long because when they sing, you cannot be unhappy and you can sing. You have to be involved in it 100% to sing. And I consider that as one of my biggest lessons. And as a photographer, as much as emotions that I carry into a shoot, when I am with the camera, it's like a Zen place for me. I automatically switch to that mode. Though before there is a whole business angle to photography, when I'm with the camera, that's like a really happy place. So that's something that I genuinely enjoy, even now, in spite of the fact that there are so many challenges. Okay, having said that, if I have to go back to my 2010 self and I mean, tell myself these are the lessons that you should do correctly, the couple of things that I would tell is stop buying things. Because one of the biggest mistakes a lot of people who want to get into photography is they end up buying a lot of equipment, and buying equipment makes you owner of the equipment and not a good photographer. And that doesn't make you a great, and now any guy can buy the top end camera and call himself a photographer, start a Facebook page and call himself a photographer. Maybe not Facebook now, it's more Instagram these days. So that's not going to get, and that's thankfully when I started out, there was not much of distraction in terms of Instagram and Facebook and stuff. It was largely website, and Orkut used to be there, but that was not like a mainstream channel. You still have to do real social media, call friends, this friend, that friend is getting married, figure out this thing. So all of that helped. One of the big things, stop spending money is one big lesson. Discipline is something that I still lack and I still work on, because you have to keep doing the same things again and again and again over a period of time, which I'm still working on. That's always going to be a work in progress. One thing that you told me is like, I've crossed the sea. No, I haven't crossed the sea. Maybe I'm bang in the middle of the sea. I don't know whether I'll sink or reach the shore. But this thing is, the moment you think you have achieved, there is only one way to go after that, is to go down. So I don't think photography is always going to be a work in progress for me. And at least I look at it as a way of life rather than just work. And the other major thing is consistency. Whatever you do, you have to be consistent. It's not only photography. It's like people talk about these fad diets. Any diet, standard rules. You do it for 6 to 9 months. Even you eat what you eat today for 6 months, you will be in a healthy place in about 9 months. So consistency is one big lesson I've learned in about last 10, 12 years. You just have to keep doing it again and again and again. And you get good at it, whatever you do. Hard work and all is like nice to say, but nobody explains what hard work is. But it's largely discipline, consistency, don't spend too much money, don't take too much debt positions, and shoot a lot. One thing that I will tell all photographers, new, old, even if you ask the most experienced photographers, they'll say the same thing: shoot a lot. You want to get good at it, do it like a million times. You will know what you like, you will know what you don't like. The biggest trick in photography is to learn what you don't like. Because I know that there are certain genres of photography that at least now I'm not interested in.
Okay, in that phase, like I would probably take you to your where you are really interested in. This may be a very good lesson for the photographers, Indian photographers who are seeing this video also. Your passion into cycle took you to a very unique position. How do you call it? That cyclist photographer. What is the term?
Cycling. I mean, you call it cycling photography.
Yeah, cycling photography. Yeah, and it took you overseas. You started shooting the international events here. I want you to take us through the journey. And the first thing is, the first event would always be something which is very unique, right? Because you actually do not know what you may probably want to do something different because it is international. Okay, but you really do not know what that international is all about. Okay, so take us through that journey.
So international, like true Indians, the moment you have an abroad trip, you will sell your soul for an abroad trip. So, but thankfully, before I went on a cycling trip, shooting weddings had taken me outside the country multiple times. And I grew up a little in Middle East. Like I think few years I grew up in Middle East, so I kind of knew abroad. Going outside the country was not completely off the. I mean, it's not such a big rush for me, but it was like all good things. I was like, wow, let's do this time. Cycling was an interesting story because in India you have only community events. You don't have races. And as a person, I didn't even follow cycling as a sport. I just knew a bunch of friends who cycle, maybe a few hundred people or a few thousand people who cycle in India. And Indian cycling itself is like super nascent. I imagine cricket in 1960s or cricket in 1950s. It was that nascent that's it's still that nascent in India. So there is not much of racing and stuff happening. The first opportunity for me for shooting, to covering any international event happened in Korea. As in South Korea, there was this race which is a accredited race called Tour de Korea, where it's a stage race which is held over 5-6 days, where you have international teams coming in. Very similar to your Premier League kind of a thing, where you have club teams that will come in, and or we'll call it trade teams. And that the irony is, so that opportunity came because I was always in cycling, and I used to keep in touch with a lot of international contacts, like websites and people. And one of the international website editors became a good friend, and he used to be. I would call him. I don't want to refer him by name, but I would call him one of the. He has helped Indian cycling in more ways than many. Not only me, athletes and stuff. And he used to tell us, and he reached out saying, "Hey, would you want to go to Korea to shoot this? To be a part of this event?" And I said, "What does it take to be in the event?" And he said, "You're not going to be a photographer. You're going to be a reporter." And I had no idea what a race means till then. So, and I didn't know what. And then I reached out to another cycling friend in Bangalore, and his name is Naveen. He's an Indian national champion. And I went to his house and said, "Hey, how does a cycling race work? Tell me the rules of a cycling race." Because till then I didn't even know how to read a race. Because unless you know the sport, how will you report about a sport? And I did have my camera and stuff, and I'll take pictures, and I had absolutely no idea where I will be in the race. And the race is something that happens in a typical race day. You have about 150, 180 kilometers of racing that happens, up to 200 kilometers of racing. And I didn't know what are the dynamics of the race day itself. Which I had to figure on the ground. I hit the ground and I realized I will not see the race throughout the day, and all I'll hear about the race is in the radio, and I'll be in a car which is 2 kilometers ahead of the race. And whatever happens in the race, people will keep commenting about it, and I'll be tweeting about it in Twitter saying this is what is happening in the race based on my idea of what the race is happening and how the race will progress. At the end of the day, I'll reach the finish line faster than the race, and I'll see the finish of the race first. And I'll take a bunch of photographs at the finish line. It so happens that some of the people who raced at that level are now participating in Tour de France and stuff. And I get to like now say that, hey, I've seen those guys grow up from then to now, from 2000, I think it was 2015. From 2015 till now, I've seen these guys grow step by step. And that was my baptism in cycling, competitive cycling. Going to Korea, covering the race as a reporter and writing race reports and not being a photographer, it helped me plan better. What to expect, and then I completely fell into the sport. Absolutely fell in love with the sport, and I would say that that's the only sport I largely follow daily. I even there are groups, there are Reddit groups that I sit and troll on gossip with cycling, who's doing what. It's again not from a reporter or a photographer point of view, more as a guy who follows the sport. Hence, it also helps me work with cycling. When I'm a photographer, I know strategies. I know who's going to come where, and maybe today is a flat day, so it's going to be sprinting stage. So some of the strategies you kind of understand. It's like cricket. On a spinning wicket, you know the spinners are going to do well, and the spinners will come at the slog overs. There is some strategy to it. You will never see a spinner come in the first 5 overs in, say, a test match. You will see them come only when the wicket is gone. But that knowledge of the wicket wearing out and stuff makes you makes you hooked into the sport in the first place. So Korea was my first experience, and that's where I kind of learned more about the sport. And then one at a time, I kind of picked up the sport, and then I started doing a lot more.
Fantastic. Okay, so now we go to the final section. This is something which is very close to my heart. Like
Mm-hmm.
trying to get as much possible to give the next generation the learning from you. Um, Cycling is your passion. Photography is your profession. Okay, let us
Mm-hmm.
probably take this as a philosophical. Take it as a philosophical. How important is having some kind of a fixation to something? Very important for building a career. Like whether it is career can be something like a job, or it can also be an entrepreneurship. Okay, uh, it's almost like how important is having some kind of a, how to say, crazy liking towards something.
Yeah, I would say it is. I mean, it's a easy question. I mean, it's you need to have, it is mandatory to have some kind of passion, I mean, mad fixation or blind faith in what you do, or you want to do it. As I said earlier in this conversation, you need to be able to do it on a bad day. When you wake up and you're feeling terrible, like a lot of people will relate to waking up on a Monday morning and say, "Oh, I have to go to office and I have to do this." Let's assume that I have a shoot on Monday morning. I mean, maybe Monday morning might be grumpy and all of that, but the shoot itself is something that I want to be a part of, irrespective of how terrible my day was before and after and stuff. So it's extremely important to have at least one of those things in your life. Over the years, I've inculcated interest in more than one thing, which will keep me happy, and I can keep doing it again and again and again. Photography taught me that lesson, how working hard and doing this diligently over a period of time, that you can get better at it, and especially it keeps you happy. And happiness need not always mean financial security. Financial security is whatever happens financially is a byproduct of how disciplined you are. At some level, maybe luck, but I wouldn't even call it luck. You just move your pieces. Right now, I'm in a phase of life that I'm not chasing money. I'm just chasing peace and quiet at home. Uh, so, and you can change what you
for
want with it.
for for a starter, or maybe even a pre-starter, like the matured industries have a provisions like internship,
Mhm.
mentorship, something like that. Does photography community also has something like that? Like, do you work with students? Do you work with freshers?
Yes and no. Yes and no. You have professional courses taught by design schools and photography schools which teach photography. I have no formal education in photography. I've learned pretty much everything. Internet is one of the big learning experiences, and then I've gone to a lot of international workshops, local workshops, learned from other photographers and stuff. But personally, I never interned with anybody. And I would consider it as a blessing in disguise, because right now that's another thing that a lot of photographers, I mean, there are internships where people take in interns across the industry. uh, I would say take it with a big tablespoon of salt when you intern with somebody, because this is a visual art at some level, and it's a lot of interpretation and a lot of personal belief system that you translate into the image or visual that you're creating. It gets into a little bit of hassle, because when you work with somebody, you tend to start thinking like them. It's just human to start thinking and looking like another person. So there is a famous saying. I mean, like a lot of people know Maniratnam as a director in Tamil Nadu, and I mean, this is a good example. Is Maniratnam never was an assistant director to somebody else. He just became a director. Though he came from a film family and stuff, he understood the process, and he decided to make a movie one fine day. It so happened to be a Kannada movie with Anil Kapoor in it, uh, but he just became a director. And I believe in that. I mean, like, if you want to do something, just do it. I mean, you don't have to go and be a slave to somebody else, unless you find somebody really good who will teach you stuff. Like, for example, when a lot of people approach me and say, "Can I be your intern?" I'm like, "Hey, look, if you're my intern, I mean, I only take in my second shooters are mercenaries who I don't want to teach anything. I want them to perform. I don't want them to practice." And in most cases, professional photographers, when they take in people to work for them, they don't want people to practice at their cost. If something goes wrong, it's the photographer's name is on the line. So that's one. But there are organizations, maybe there are like bigger photography organizations where they do take interns and stuff. Again, same problems arise. The market is fairly saturated right now, at least at the entry level. Event photography, wedding photography. There are way too many photographers than weddings happening. The demand has been consistently growing, whereas the supply of photographers going up is geometrically progressing. That pretty much means that's a terrible market to get into. So if there are any photographers who are listening to or wannabe photographers listening to, if you're considering getting into wedding photography, think twice. Find your own niche and shoot a lot. If you have another job, keep that job for a while and keep shooting till a point where you know that this photography keeps you happy. Or doing this keeps you entertained and happy, and in the process you can make a living out of it.
Fantastic, fantastic. Uh, See, one line which keeps coming and coming back again and again from you, which is something which I really admire, is that pick a job or pick an activity which you will be very happy to do it in your bad day or your worst day. I think that summarizes a beautiful thing about your experience. Chenthil, absolutely fantastic talking to you. Your final closing remarks.
Closing remarks. Stay safe, stay healthy. In this terrible times, photography is one of the worst affected industries because it's non-essential. I don't know. I mean, I know that it's going to be a long time before I start getting work even remotely as much as I used to work before. But one of the most important things for anybody in photography or wanting to get into photography or anything visual or creative, this is a good time to work on yourself and practice your art a lot now. And there will be a time where you can put all of this practice into performance. Stay safe, stay mentally and physically safe. And as much as you work on yourself, it will all translate into your work at a later point.
Perfect, fantastic. And viewers, one thing probably would have strike you in your head. How can a photographer speak so nicely? Just one small extra information about Chenthil. He is also a professional speaker. You can actually contact him in case you want some kind of a motivational speech and things.
I don't do motivational speeches. In most cases, I'm demotivating my speeches. But yeah, I mean, most of the talking I do is largely photography and how to chase your dreams and largely to do with survival.
Okay.
Because
okay.
I mean, it's easy to go and say chase your dreams, but chasing your dreams means you're going to get.
Yeah, it is important coming from a person who literally chased the dream. That makes a lot of difference.
True.
It is lovely talking to you, Chenthil. Thank you so much for your time.
Same here, Sampath. Thanks a lot, Satish. It's an awesome time to spend with you right now, and hopefully people get something out of this rambling of mine.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.